China's Communist Party is meeting to approve its new leadership. The week-long party congress will end with a transition of power to Vice President Xi Jinping. But beneath those staged, managed smiles lies the tempestuous realities of governing an emerging world power. It also comes as the Chinese people are beginning to discover their voice and increasingly calling for reform of the party's ironclad grip on power. Now, joining me here in the studio is Guo Bai, a former advisor to the French Embassy. Thank you for being with us. Adam Magay, a journalist and specialist on Sino-African relations. Emmanuel Linko, and the editor-in-chief of Le Monde Chinois. And from Washington, D.C., the Financial Times' Richard McGregor, formerly the paper's Beijing correspondent and author of The Party, The Secret Worlds of China's Communist Rulers. But first, France 24's Eve Irvine is in Beijing to cover the party's 18th Congress and went out onto the city streets just to gauge how much interest there is in the appointment of a new party chief.
The 18th National People's Congress is currently taking place in Tiananmen Square, just a 15-minute drive from this traditional neighbourhood, the Chonglauwan Hutong. It's a once-in-a-decade transition of power, a major event, but one which here is largely going unnoticed.
I have no expectations. We ordinary people don't care too much. No matter who the leader is, it has nothing to do with ordinary people.
Who cares? I hear Xi Jinping could be the next leader, but he's not in power yet. I think he's capable.
The Chinese don't get to vote for their leaders. It's the party elite that chooses who power is handed over to, leaving the man on the street no say in the matter.
I hope in the future there will be gradual reforms. I hope our leaders will do better.
While all is calm here in the heart of Beijing, volunteers whose job it is to act as civil security guards on behalf of the party say that they have been put on high alert.
During the Congress, the control is higher, so I'm busy. I have to warn some people. I have to prevent. I have to educate them. I have to educate these people who might campaign against the party.
During the Congress, extra security measures have been put in place. The party wants to ensure that the transition of power passes off smoothly and that they retain the control and the power that they have had since 1949.
And joining me now from Beijing is France 24's Henry Morton. Henry, thanks for being with us. The party's outgoing General Secretary, President Hu Jintao, delivered his starkest warning yet about fighting rampant corruption. Did it fall onto deaf ears?
I don't think so. The matter of corruption has been becoming more apparent in the Communist Party over the last few years. It's reaching the sort of point where it's just simply unsustainable. Corruption at all levels, it's systemic within the party. The way that China's government is set up, there are extremely few checks and balances in place. You have a judiciary that is not independent. You have media which is not independent. So in other countries where you would have corruption, say, being uncovered at various levels throughout the sort of country, throughout various levels, either through independent media or through an independent judiciary, you simply don't have that here in China. And it's extremely difficult for people who are affected by corruption to get sort of any recompense and to get sort of any justice at all from the system that's currently in place. We're seeing a lot of social disorder coming about because of corruption, particularly on a local level. A huge problem that we have in China in rural areas is the appropriation of land, very often by corrupt local officials. The sort of rural classes, the peasants in China, they have absolutely no recourse to, as I say, a judicial process or to try and publicise their cases in a sort of media sense. And very often that frustration turns into anger, and you see a large number of violent confrontations between rural communities and rural police because of this corruption and this land grabbing by officials. The government is becoming more and more aware of it. They say they've been saying over the last few years that they're trying to do more and more about it. However, I think in reality, whilst they're saying a lot, trying to appease people here, not actually that much is being done to tackle it. However, large corruption scandals like Bo Xilai we had a few months ago, the former party boss in Chongqing, massive corruption scandal there, his wife convicted of the murder of a British businessman, Neil Hayward. That made nationwide news here. The Chinese Communist Party having to be seen to be doing something about that. And Hu Jintao widely thought to be making reference to that in his speech this morning when he said that no one is above the law. However, as I say, a lot of that is to try and appease people here. In reality, what's actually being done to tackle corruption, it's very difficult to say if anything is actually changing.
Thanks for that. At this point, I'd like to ask you, Abai, are we really seeing a changing of the guard? It really looks like more of the same, doesn't it?
Well, anyway, all the Chinese reforms that has happened in the past 30 years has been in a gradual form, and that has been accepted by both the party and also the people. And actually, I have the result of a very interesting survey that has just been released today. It has been conducted by the Global Times in Beijing, and they say that although 81% of the people who were surveyed support political reform, but 69% of them support a gradual reform. So we hope that in the following years, we are going to see more and more people's participation in the supervision of the political power and also the behaviors of the governmental structures. We want to see a more autonomy of the civil society, and we want to see more self-organization of Chinese communities so that they can be a strong countervailing power upon the political reform and push the political reform. And so we are also looking for the media as well in China, which has been participating more and more into China's reform and the social governance. And so all these are going to be good directions for us to look into, but I don't think we are expecting any radical change in the political form in any sense.
It seems, Emmanuel Linko, from what people have been saying at this Congress in its first day, that they are certainly not going to change any of its hardline policies. And as Gua just pointed out, obviously it's going to be a more gradual evolution as opposed to a revolution as such. But is that enough for the Chinese people? Because there certainly seems to be growing anger that not enough is being done.
I think we're just arriving at a crossroad because, as you know, there were many corruption affairs, and Bo Xilai was marginalized by the Communist Party. It means that there are many antagonisms inside the party itself, and there is a lack of reform. In fact, during the last 10 years, Hu Jintao and Wen Jiabao didn't reform as expected to do. This is a reason why among the civil society there is a big frustration, I think, and there is also a gap between the institutions, the Communist Party, and the expectation also of this social society, civil society, I would say.
Adam Magay, given China wants to be a world player, and certainly in Africa it's become very much a prominent part of the landscape there, do you think while it's been very busy extending its influence to other regions, that it's ignoring its own domestic problems?
It's clear that China is a global power, and its economic rise is a reality today. In terms of purchasing power parity, it has become the number 2 economy in the world, just behind the USA, and most of the production indicate that in the next 20-30 years it will be the leading economic power in the world. In addition, politically, China is projecting its power because it needs to be present in certain places, especially in Africa, in order to secure the resources to achieve its global objectives. But the problem is today that we are dealing with a country that is not very open. The leadership is professional. Most of the 9 members of the standing committee of the Politburo running China under Hu Jintao and Wen Jiabao, they were graduates from universities, and the current crop of leadership come from the best schools, Tsinghua, for Mr. Xi Jinping and Beijing University for Mr. Li Keqiang, who is going to become the Prime Minister. It's clear, however, that what we are seeing here, most likely, is a country that has to manage a population of 1.3 billion inhabitants. It is a huge continent, over 9 million kilometers square, and you cannot manage such a country just on the basis of somehow the reckless, I don't want to use that word, but excessive form of democracy that we see in the West. You need to have somehow a managed democracy, and that is how the person who institutionalized the Communist Party, Mr. Hu Jintao, Mr. Deng Xiaoping, following the 1989 Tiananmen problem, as they call it in China, he said that he wants China to become a democracy around the year 2050, if I'm not wrong. So it is very important when you are dealing with China to look in the long run. You remember this sentence when Henry Kissinger visited China and met Mao Zedong. It is said that he asked, how do you call him, the late Prime Minister
Zhou
Enlai, what does he think about the French Revolution? And he said, 200 years, it is still early. So when you talk about China, you need to look at the long-term prospects.
But you talk about the long-term prospects, but the reality is, Gua, there are people, Chinese dissidents, who would say the time is now. I mean, that is a convenient excuse by the political establishment not to bring about change, not to sort of release power as such. Or share power, rather.
Well, we have to understand that when we are talking about political reform in China, we may talk about different concepts, like in China and outside of China. So inside China, like today, Hu Jintao himself talks a lot about political reform, but he especially said that China is not going to copy the Western style of democracy. So the political reform in China is going to happen, but it's going to happen, as he just pointed out very correctly, in a gradual way, and they are going to manage the process. For the Chinese, the process is very important. It's maybe as important as the content. So we need to see how they manage it. Like, for example, they may start with some things they can do, such as they can diminish the administrative power of the local governments as a start. And that actually has been tried in Canton province, starting from last month or the past few months. So we can see that we have all these positive signs, and they are trying, they are experimenting, and they want some change to happen as well. The party itself also wants the change to happen.
At this point, I just want to bring in Richard McGregor from Washington, D.C. Richard, Xi Jinping is yet another member of the Red Nobility, a member of the party elite. Do you really think he's open to the idea of reform, of any reform?
Let me apologise at the start for the way we're doing this with the sound, but yes, on the issue, well, I think he certainly is open to the idea of reform. Exactly what kind of reform and exactly how far he can take it, we don't know that. Xi Jinping is part of the Red Nobility, but I think it's a mistake just to consider that his political personality is entirely defined by the fact that he does come from a politically privileged family. He's done a whole range of jobs within China, in some poorer provinces, in Fujian, in Zhejiang, and also in Shanghai. So he has a broad administrative experience. But I think we can be sure of one thing. Western observers, as your former guest, previous guest implied, are always kind of expect China to become more like the West, and that really is not going to happen. When you talk about political reform in China, it really is about reform inside the Communist Party, and that's where it starts for the moment.
Adam McGay, what do you say about that? It's all about reform within the party as opposed to widespread reform as such.
Absolutely, but that's what happened. If you remember 1989, when the Communist Party was challenged, what was discovered was that the Communist Party was weak when it was not able to appear as a united party leadership, because that's what the students saw. When they saw that there was a division within the leadership party, they managed to challenge it. Then they decided to have a consensual approach within the party. And since then, if you see the type of leaders, the crop of leaders they prepare, they are people who are well educated, not only well educated, but they have experience, they are bred into becoming real leaders. Xi Jinping has been, as you said, one of the top leaders of the party in Zhejiang province, in Fujian, near the province, as they call it in China, of Taiwan, but also near, he worked as a top leader in Shanghai. So he has been bred, qualified, and he also was put as responsible of the Communist Party school all these years. So he knows what's happening, what are the talents. And last point to highlight is that these people, they don't stay in power forever, as compared with Africa. You stay in power 2 terms, 10 years, everything is clear, people are prepared, and there is an age limit. And once you are out of power, like Zhurongji, you disappear. And that is somehow a Beijing political approach that is being projected, that is in comparison in terms of delivering results with what the West is offering to the rest of the world.
Emmanuel, would you agree?
We should remember that this process is quite new because precisely of 1989, because of the clash of Tiananmen, you know.
89.
And then they decided to reform inside the party. So things are not so easy, and I think we shouldn't compare China during Mao Zedong era, you see. Things have changed very much. What is very important is to remind the fact that Xi Jinping was deported when he was a teenager during the Cultural Revolution in the remote provinces. So what does it mean? It means now some leaders who are 60 or even 70 years old do not want to live again this terrible period of the history of China during the early 60s, you see. And this is the reason why also Bo Xilai was expelled from the Communist Party, because Bo Xilai was the representative of this new left party inside the Communist Party, you see, with a strong nostalgia about Maoism. And it means also that this new leadership doesn't want to come back to the previous situation.
Emmanuel Lincoln, I'm just afraid we're going to have to press the pause button because we do need to take a short break, but do stay with us for the second part of the Frans van Kat debate.